All right, here are the correct answers for directed reading B. This section is called What is Climate? And it starts on, I believe, page 72 in your book. Um, so a big part of our studies at first is going to be what's the difference between climate and weather? So number one, what kind of conditions vary from day to day? Well, that's the weather. Weather varies all the time. One day it could be cold, the other day it could be warm, it could rain one day, it could snow the next. So that's the weather. The climate, though, is the average weather condition in an area over a long period of time. So the climate might be something like cold winters and warm summers, because that's the trend over a long period of time for an area. Or a place like Hawaii has a very warm climate because throughout the year it's very warm. So climate is over a long period of time. Weather is just day to day, hour to hour even. Okay, now there's five main factors that affect climate and weather. The first one is latitude. That's the first main factor to affect climate. So it says, what does latitude measure? It measures the distance from the equator. So the equator is 0 latitude, and then the further you get from the equator, the numbers go up. So the North Pole is 90 degrees north latitude. So that's the highest latitude. I think Chicago is like in the 40s or the high 30s for latitude. So it's like halfway almost to the North Pole. 4. Why is the temperature at the equator warmer than the temperature at the poles? Because the sun hits the equator directly. Sunlight, the Earth is tilted. Let's see if I can get you a picture here. Sorry for all the clicks going down. All right, take a look at this. So the sun's rays always hit the equator directly. Always hit the equator directly. So the equator, right across the center, is always warm. But now the further you get away from the equator, that sunlight is kind of glancing off the Earth. So up here, the sun doesn't hit it directly. It kind of hits it at an angle. So up here, it never gets very warm. And down here, it never gets very warm. But here at the equator, it's like a direct hit. And so the equator always stays really warm. 5. What causes the seasons? It's the tilt of the Earth's axis. So the Earth is tilted. If you can't really see it here, well, maybe you can. The Earth is tilted this way. So here's North America. Here's the North Pole is actually over here. It's not up here. It's actually here because the Earth is tilted like right through there. Okay? And that causes the seasons. Prevailing winds, 6. What are prevailing winds? Oh, I'm sorry. Prevailing winds are another factor that affects the climate of an area. What are prevailing winds? Winds that blow mainly from one direction. So the wind is, like for Illinois, our wind always tends to come from the west and the northwest, actually, the northwest. So that's a prevailing wind. Mountains are another thing that affects the weather. Or it affects the climate, I should say. So 7, the height of an object above sea level is elevation. 8, a mountain can influence an area's climate because it can affect the area's temperature and precipitation. 9, the land on the windward side of a mountain range is often green and lush. And 10, one side of a mountain range is often dry because it is in a rain shadow. So as the air goes up one side of the mountain, it rains on the one side. We call that the windward side of the mountain. And then when the air gets the other side of the mountain, there's no rain left, and so the other side is really dry. Large bodies of water also affect climate. So 11, how does a large body of water affect nearby land? Because temperature changes are less sudden, because the water kind of keeps the temperature the same throughout the year. 12. Parts of Michigan could have 350 inches of snow in 1 year. What is the cause? And the reason is because of moist air from the Great Lakes. So a large body of water can also affect precipitation. Ocean currents are another factor for climate. 13, there are stream-like movements of water on top of the ocean. What are they called? Surface currents. Let's see if I can find a picture of surface currents. All right, so here are some of the common surface currents. And like within the ocean, within the Atlantic Ocean here, there are currents, almost like a river of water flowing in different directions. So this is a Gulf current. It's warm water that flows north. And then there's these cold water currents that come down from the poles and flow and bring cold water going down. So these are just some of the common surface currents, and they really affect the weather. And look at all that water that's going to affect the weather of the whole Earth. 14, the current that flows northward off the east coast of North America and past Iceland is the Gulf Stream. 15, how does the Gulf Stream affect the climate of Iceland? It makes the climate milder. So even though Iceland is way up here, it actually has a pretty moderate, not warm climate, but it never gets super cold because this Gulf Stream brings warm water and warm air all the time to Iceland. Uh, 16, climates of the world. Why do different parts of the world have such different different animals? Sorry. Why do different parts of the world have such different animals? Because animals adapt to one climate. So polar bears can live in a cold climate, but they wouldn't do very well in a desert, hot climate. 17, which of the following describes a biome? It's one kind of climate. All right, so 18, use the map below to answer questions 18 through 19. Read the words, then draw a line from the dot next to each word to the matching letter on the map. So temperature goes, a temperature, I see what it is. All right, so the tropical climate is this area in here, where it tends to be really warm because it's near the equator, so we call that the tropical climates. The temperate climates are kind of the in-between, so we live up here in a temperate climate. Temperate means that you're going to have different temperatures. You're going to have cold winters and warm summers and fall and spring, whereas here in the tropics it's always warm. And then the polar climates are up at the poles, and they're always going to be cold. All right. So make sure you have all the correct answers for directed reading B. And then you'll have to turn in directed reading B as well. Thanks.